Hey everyone, in the video I'm going to give you my first impression of the Sony A7R5 and we're going to do a quick hands-on review out here in the field. None of the garbage, just straight to the important stuff that we need as landscape photographers. And I'll tell you what, the results are actually quite surprising. Let's take a look. The main reason why I like being handheld is it just gets me in more of a flow state. I'm not thinking about the setting up the tripod, I'm just doing it. I'm just being with nature, moving and just being in the moment, not thinking at all. And that's the ideal state to be in to create, in my opinion. So here we are in the dense Fiordland beech forest, surrounded by ferns, beautiful trees, the perfect little location here with the low light to test out the camera. So let me clarify that I have zero affiliation with Sony, and there's definitely other camera models I'll be happy shooting with. The video today is not an in-depth review on the camera. This is the part that I'm really curious about, is the improved stabilization. Now, if you've seen some of my other videos, you know that I'm exclusively a handheld shooter. I have been for 5 years. I haven't used a tripod unless it was for an astro shot. So everything else you've ever seen of me has not been using a tripod. And that was with cameras, the Mark II, 3, 4, that didn't have stabilization as good as this. So I'm really curious to see how this could actually further improve my workflow and just completely destroyed any need for a tripod. When it comes to sharpness, it's either sharp or it isn't. To me, there's no in between. There's no sharp enough. It's just, is it in focus or isn't it? You can't compromise. You got to really aim for that optimal quality. You never know if you're going to print something 60 inches wide. You don't want to have something where it's like, oh, that print's only good at smaller sizes because it wasn't actually in focus. I don't adhere to that approach. It's either sharp or it isn't. The shutter speed, how slow you can go, will be determined by your focal length. The more you're zooming, the faster the shutter speed will need to be. 12mm on the Mark IV, the slowest I could get pretty confidently would be about 1/5 of a second, 1/5. Anything slower than that had a real low success rate. Now, let's see what we can do. I'm at 12mm and we're just going to run through a few different speeds. Let's begin at the first speed I said, which was 1/5, what was safe on the Mark IV. I've done that. Now I'm going to slow down to 1/4 and 1/3. Let's just check those results now. I'll check that in camera at 1/3. Okay, tack sharp. So we've already pushed beyond what was capable in the previous model, which is really what you'd expect, and I'd be pretty disappointed if it wasn't the case, because this was the main reason why I wanted to purchase this camera. Now let's start to slow it down more. So we've done 1/3. Let's do 0.4 seconds, and that's one-handed, so that's not very stable. Let's check. Okay, so we're sharp at 0.4 one hand. Let's go 0.5, so half a second. Gonna check and zoom in. All right, we're tack sharp at half a second. Let's just try 1 second exposure, and I'll just chill for a sec, get my breath. Okay, that's out. Try again. It's still slightly out. These are barely out. You need to zoom in really tight to check, but this is what I'm saying. You got to be strict when you're doing this. You don't want to get home, get it on the big screen, and then realize that it was not sharp. So one more. Nah, still out. So I don't know if 1 second is going to be really possible just standing like I am. All right, so I feel like up to half a second, 0.6 seconds is almost guaranteed success rate at 12mm. Anything slower is going to be hit and miss. I'm pretty determined to see if we can get 1 second. So resting on a tree like this, or sitting and being in a crouch position, they're common positions I put myself in without even really thinking. And all right, we have a sharp one at 1 second. Gee, it feels like eternity when you're holding that. And you're kidding me. 2.5 seconds handheld. So that is, that's beyond what I expected. That's almost, well, you're holding your breath for that time, and you can kind of feel your heart in your chest. I can't imagine a scenario where I'd be trying to go any longer than that anyway. But yeah, that's really impressive. Look, I don't expect people would be doing that in most scenarios, but if you are finding yourself in a position where you want to experiment with that, I don't even think I'd be needing 2.5 seconds. I just, from the last 5 years of being handheld, there's just very rarely a moment where I'd need that, but that's really handy to know, and to know that you can definitely get up into that 1 second mark very, very comfortably. 3.2 seconds, so One thing to be standing and holding it to your face, but then once you sit or rest on an object, I reckon 4 seconds is easily achievable. But for today, pretty comfortably getting in the 2.5 seconds, and then third attempt, 3.2 seconds. If we do the ISO test now, half a second at ISO 1000. We can zoom in there and look at the results. Man, it is clean. I've gone to ISO 2000, so now I just need to speed the shutter slightly. That's 1/4 of a second. And now let's just start to get silly. Go ISO 10,000. Got to speed the shutter even more, 15th. And lastly, how about ISO 20,000? And a 40th. So let's look at those results, and that is a long way from the Mark IV. So that's really nice. So this is such a big difference, and that's really cool. That's great to see. You know, even the man, the ISO 2000 is very impressive. That's really nice, and that's actually quite surprising. I wasn't really thinking too much about ISO performance when I purchased this, but that's really nice to know. The last feature that I just want to quickly have a look at is the inbuilt focus stacking. Finally, we've got that on Sony. It's been in Nikon and Canon for a while. This is something I'll definitely be using. We'll do a test shot now on the ground here, and we're basically just going to line up this foreground, getting ultra close. In the menu, there's a few options with setting this up. I'm more or less leaving it on the default, except for, I'm just going to say 6 shots. I just know from experience we're not going to need more than that. It always depends on your f-stop, and I'm going to be at f9 here, so that'll be more than enough. All I'm going to do is focus on the starting point and then let the camera take care of the rest. So we'll just shoot away. All right, it's done 6 shots, and then I'll just quickly review on the back what we've got. You've seen probably my other videos, my workflow for doing this manually, but that just really saves time, makes it a little bit easier. That's a nice feature. Okay, final thoughts. I would put this camera and the Canon R5, which is basically the same as far as specs are concerned, I'd put those at the top of the list for me as a landscape photographer, if budget wasn't an issue. Now, I'm a realist. I know that this is expensive stuff, and not everyone can afford this type of gear. But don't worry, gear is really the last part of the equation. There's so much more to image making than the gear you're using. It's what I call the 4 pillars of landscape photography. You might have seen a webinar I've done on this. If you haven't, just check out the link below. But these are the other factors that are really the most important part of image making, the gear just being, you know, a means to an end, basically. If you have any questions about the camera, just let me know below. For me, the biggest aspect's definitely that stabilization, being able to just push the limits a little bit further than I have in the past. I don't think I'd be going longer than 1 second very often, but leading up to 1 second, the success rate is really high. So thanks for viewing the video, and I'll see you in the next one.